to present an extremely topical discussion together with BusyLamp concerning legal spend management during the times of uncertainty that COVID has brought to us in the past year. And without further ado, I will give it over to Joe from BusyLamp. Joe?
Thank you, Martin. And thank you for everyone for joining us today for another of the webinars that BusyLamp are running in conjunction with ECLA. As you'll see from our slides, actually, Martin, can you move the slide on for me so that? Thank you. So my name is Jo Guy, and I joined BusyLamp in January of this year as a customer success manager looking after our UK and our US-based clients. I joined from Lloyds Banking Group, where I held several roles in sourcing and legal operations and actually the legal community, managing the bank through their journey to select, implement and roll out e-billing. Then as part of a team extracting the data, and finally as a lawyer setting up matters, reviewing and approving invoices for payment. I'm joined today by Daniel Waite from ADF and Lynn Kellett of EDF for a question and answer session where we will talk through their experiences of e-billing through the COVID pandemic and the decision to proceed with the implementation despite the challenges of a remote setup. We welcome questions from the audience and will open up after the question and answer session. So Daniel, if you can, Martin, if you can please move on to the next slide. So just a quick run through to get everyone on started of what do we mean by legal spend management. Lots of people just assume that that just means e-billing and it's just paying invoices. As most of us on the call know, a typical legal team will receive thousands of invoices from outside counsel every year. These invoices will contain multiple line items for different types of work, and many legal departments are unable to track exactly what they are spending, with which firms and on what type of matters. All the spend is tracked via multiple finance or accounting systems, giving different outcomes depending on how the data is cut. In some organisations, departments outside of legal can also instruct law firms directly, and the legal department may never see these costs. So legal spend management is the practice of improving visibility and controlling outside counsel spend, identifying and actioning cost reduction opportunities and budgeting future spend. Doing this effectively without technology is both time consuming and prone to error. More and more legal departments are turning to legal spend management software to take advantage of automation and reporting. The first stage in legal spend management is, however, to automate the review of legal invoices, the process known as e-billing. Martin, if you can just click onto the next slide, please. So while legal e-billing reduces costs quickly by enforcing and possibly introducing billing guidelines for the first time in the relationship between a client and the law firm, and increasing team productivity, full legal spend management goes further than this. After 1 or 2 years of using a legal spend management solution, legal teams will have sufficient data to spot trends that can influence strategic spend management decisions, aid a repanelling process, and drive further savings. The software enables legal departments to report on spend and use this data to make sourcing decisions in conjunction with their sourcing or procurement teams, drive negotiations and selection, and create collaborative, value-driven relationships with the firms. Typical outcomes could include significant reduction of legal spend, faster invoicing process time, ability to track work in progress and accumulating costs, improved accuracy of budget forecasts over time, improved visibility into matters, faster reporting times and easier reporting, counsel spending less time on admin, access to accurate, consistent, comparable and reliable data across all matters, better value for money and or service from your law firms, access to data that drives strategic legal operations and management decisions, including sourcing, panel reviews and negotiations, and most importantly, like-for-like comparison and review of all of your law firms. Imagine this, all of this from the introduction of just one system that you can introduce into your legal department. So having whizzed you through legal spend management, I'm now going to open up the discussion with Lynn and Dan. So I'm joined by Lynn, who's Managing Legal Counsel for Nuclear New Builds at EDF, and Daniel Waite, Legal Technology Analyst from ADF Foods. So they're going to share their experiences on legal spend management during the pandemic and how it has helped their organisations. So opening up with the first question, so handing over to, opening with Dan, how is legal spend management software helping you specifically at these unusual times?
So one thing ABF that we are mindful of is that legal is rarely a revenue generating department within our business. The only time that we actually manage to generate any revenue is through litigation and class actions. So we are very mindful that actually we spend a lot of money and we need to be accountable for what we spend. We've got to be responsible and thoughtful about how we use that money. Over the past 12 months, it's been well documented that one of ABF's major businesses, Primark, has been closed, and this has meant that we've burnt through a lot of cash. So this, although there's been no direct mandate from the top, we know that we need to just be responsible with what we're spending, and we're now more likely than ever going to make sure that where we can maximize our value add from law firms through e-billing, that we do that. So one of the ways that we have done that is through the implementation of BusyLamp, making sure that we know what we spend, where we spend the money, and who we spend it with. What do you do, Lynn?
So our journey, I think, has been a little bit different to yours in terms of we've only just got BusyLamp. So we rolled it out in September of last year. So really in the heart of the pandemic, which is an interesting time to roll out a new piece of software. But, from us, for really legal spend management is more than just e-billing. It really is that end-to-end engagement process of our law firms and making sure that we are getting the best value for money out of our law firms. Now, we very much at EDF consider our law firms to be partners, particularly at a time at the moment. I think we all need to be in this together. And so we really want to use the tool to enhance that relationship between us and our partner firms. And, for us, legal spend management is helping, or I hope will help to achieve a lot of that by simplifying processes, making it easier for our teams to review invoices, making it easier for us to really understand where the value add is coming from our partner firms, whether that be, through various different spend solutions in our framework agreements. We do have a panel at EDF that we need to closely monitor. And whether it's through that or whether it's through really looking and working out where our spend is going, which departments are using our spend, who is taking up all of the cash, can we then utilize that knowledge to be able to provide more internal training, for example, so that those teams are actually better prepared. So there's a huge value to us in spend management, but I would say we're at the beginning of the journey rather than sort of through the journey. So we're excited, but we're waiting to see how much value we can absolutely gain out of this.
That's great. Thank you both. So actually, both of you started your spend management projects before the pandemics. So what were the business priorities that made you decide it was a priority over, say, other legal tech that you could implement?
So at ABF, we actually started our legal spend management in 2012, and at that point it was a very manual process. It was a collation of historic invoices over the last 2 years, because we had no idea really how many firms we were using around the world, who was instructing the firms, and how much our actual legal spend was each year. We have a rule that basically says the business, before they engage a law firm, must talk to the lawyers. We were pretty certain that this wasn't actually happening, so we wanted to make sure that we had some visibility over that as well. So the way we did it, we collated all our invoices. We created a data input site where we required the law firms to input their invoice data, and then we fed that to a reporting tool. We actually used that for, I think, 5 or 6 years before we started to look into a legal management software, where we chose BusyLamp. And the main thing for us was we needed something that would take away that manual data-driven side of things to make it more automated and give us greater visibility. So we needed to consolidate our number of law firms because we were using hundreds and hundreds. Some of them were spending £2,000 a year with, and we needed to drive that smaller spend to the bigger spend firms where we could actually get value add from those.
So for us, I think it was a slightly different approach. We as a team, as a legal team within the nuclear new build department of the EDF legal team, we had an away day and we all sat down and we sort of said, right, how do we want to improve as a team? What is it that causes us problems? How do we solve those problems? And one of the key themes that kept coming up during that session was, I spend a lot of time managing law firms, managing invoices, reviewing invoices, and it's driving me absolutely crackers. And so it was from that we really thought, well, hang on, there must be an easy way to solve some of this. We can't be the only legal team in the country that's having this problem. So, let's have a look and see what's out there. The GC, wanted, I refer to it as the button. She wanted a button to be able to know at all times what she'd spent on what and what she had left in her budget. We were doing all of that by Excel spreadsheets, which is, I'm sure anybody who listening in knows that that's not necessarily the best way to manage a budget, particularly for lawyers who are terrible with Excel spreadsheets. So we really were trying to work out, there must be a better way to do this, to cut out all of the admin that our team goes through and really streamline the processes to be able to free our very expensive and important lawyers up to actually do the job of being a lawyer rather than an invoice reviewer. So that's where it sort of started from. And really with that, the spend management and all of the stuff that comes with it, actually, we worked as we went along that would be very useful for us as well. So slightly, dare I say, back to front approach from us, but in the end, we did a lot of work trying to work out what products were on the market. There's a few, I think is fair to say, but it's nailing down the one that was going to be best for us and offered that end-to-end solution. And obviously we came out with BusyLamp in the end.
It's really interesting how you've got such different approaches, because back at Lloyd's, we actually had a collaboration between both sourcing and legal. So legal had a matter management in place a couple of years before that they had tried to implement them both together, and funding just wasn't available. So when I joined sourcing, and like as you were saying, Lynn, it was the pain of the amount of time that was spent chasing invoices, or an invoice coming in that was 18 months old and no one then knew anything about it. So we very much had a collaboration between sourcing, saw the value of being able to get the data out of the system, because one of the things we had as a constant challenge for our repaneling was that we were getting figures that were coming from the law firms each month in an Excel spreadsheet, as Lynn was just saying, from our SAP system, and then also from an internal sourcing system. So we constantly had 3 different figures, and we're never quite sure. So if someone said to us, how much are we spending? The cut was always at a slightly different time. So it's very difficult to compare. So really our kind of sort of initial focus was trying to speed up the payment and improve the process. And that in turn then obviously led to all that valuable data. So going on from there, so obviously we've learned how we all got on. So do you have any advice for legal departments that have competing software priorities? How do you decide what's most important?
So I think we've had that challenge. We still have that challenge. I think any legal team will have that challenge. For us, it was trying to work out, legal spend management versus document management versus AI technology. There's so much stuff out there right now that as a legal team you can you can look to get, and it's really difficult to know where to focus your attention. I think for us, legal spend, and it comes back to that real priorities for us as a team. It just came out on top, but it was a challenge, and we really did have to sit back and think, hang on a minute, what do we really need? Really looking at the needs of the team, and we did a lot of work surveying the team and things about what did they actually need, and priority-wise, what did the team want first, and work through it that way. That's not to say that the other stuff has gone away. We're still working on that now. But, we just had to make a decision. We would have loved a tool that did everything, but I've since learned that is not a thing. So we've had to prioritise certain things over others. So it's been hard, but one step at a time, I think, is the only way you can do it.
Yeah, like Lynn, when we were looking to upgrade our manual impact site that we created, we were looking for that one piece solution that does everything. We spoke to our lawyers around the world. Everyone wanted a different thing. But realistically, we knew that actually what we needed was an upgrade to what we had. There was no point in us trying to find something that did everything. I'm sure we found one thing that one piece of software that claimed to do it, but we often find that when a company claims they can do everything, they rarely do anything well. So for us, we were actually quite lucky that we knew we needed to do an upgrade. We didn't really have a competing need for anything else, or no one was shouting loudly enough with a competing project, but we did have multiple IT projects happening at the same time. We had OS upgrades to all of our network, and we were also upgrading our very historic DMS. So the one thing that for me that came out of it all was that we just needed to do change management to make sure that everyone was comfortable with all the different upgrades of their IT systems at the same time. And I think even today, we still need to hold people's hands, whether it's with the new features of BusyLamp, or when BusyLamp maybe changes a couple of bits, or just any, no offense to the lawyers on the call, but my experience is lawyers are not necessarily the most technically marvelous people, as alluded to with Lynn's Excel and lawyers comment earlier. So any hand-holding and change management support that you give people really helps.
Okay. But I think the biggest piece of advice that I was ever given, and I've heard this over multiple kind of sort of legal kind of tech conferences over the years, is don't kind of start with the technology. So don't get overwhelmed by something that you see displayed, or someone comes and gives you a demo and then you think, oh, that's amazing, I really want to use it. Actually stop, and as Lynn was saying, really work through what are the processes, what are the problems in your team, and then find the technology that helps with those issues and those problems, rather than trying to do it the other way around. Because lots of people, when I've met at these conferences, have been like, oh, we've got the system, but now we're not actually really using it to its full ability. So that was definitely the biggest thing that I've learned. And I think it's obviously it's always the problem, isn't it? Is that there's always going to be a limited budget within a legal team to be allowed to introduce any new technology. So it's really building why you need it.
And there's always someone claiming a new shiny excellent product.
Yeah, exactly.
Does it really enhance what you've got?
Yeah.
Probably
and I think Dan, that the long journey that you've explained, of saying that you started back in 2012, just shows how big a project this is in organisations the size of your two, of trying to get this through.
Yeah, and that's right, Joe. It's not an easy process, but once it's implemented and running, it makes life far easier.
Yeah. So, which other stakeholders besides legal were involved in your projects, and what was their role? So I've mentioned that Lloyd's was a joint initiative between sourcing and legal, and driven by the need to have more accurate spend for repaneling. But we also had a weekly project meeting from the beginning where it was sourcing, legal, tax, finance, and IT. So we had them all involved from the beginning. So the things I learned about VAT and tax along the way, I just, I'll never get that time back. So how about you two? Did you involve anyone else?
So we heavily involved finance, I think, was a key one for us. We do a lot of reporting for our finance teams. And part of the streamline the process was, can we try and get away from a lot of that manual reporting? So the idea really by involving finance early on was to make sure that the system would give them what they needed as well as what we as a team needed. I mean, the biggest people we worked with was our IT and project management team, who essentially handheld us through the whole process. To say I am not a whiz kid at rolling out pieces of software is an understatement. So we needed, support to understand how that would work. In our industry, unsurprisingly, we have a lot of security issues, things like that. So we had to involve a lot of people from those teams from the beginning. I would say one thing, lessons learned for me, is I should have involved them earlier than I did. So, we involved them from fairly early on once we've selected what we wanted. But I think it would have been great to have actually had that input even earlier on. So lessons learned for me there is really get your stakeholders on board as soon as you can, once you've, from the beginning of having identified that there's an issue that we want to solve almost, because I think that would have been very helpful. Take everybody on that journey with us from that very first moment. We took them on the journey, but we were possibly a bit late to that.
Yeah. So we actually, because we did that from the beginning, we actually got them to write their own segments of the RFP. So it meant rather than someone in sourcing trying to write it on behalf of the others, we actually said to them, can you please draft your questions for the RFP? So that's a really good learning. How about you, Dan?
So we're actually quite lucky that the floor I work on in London has the IT team on the same floor, literally 2 desks away. So any type of conversation you have about a new IT project, there is suddenly like meerkats appearing over the desks. It's like, oh, do I need to be involved? So we were lucky that we have a great working relationship with our IT projects team, and they were on board from day one. And like Lynn said, they're the experts. They do this project management, they do the IT procurement, they know who to talk to, whether it's the internal audit teams, finance. They've got all the links to be able to tie everyone in. So we were very fortunate that they were on board from day one. They attended every meeting with us. They basically held our hands and pushed us through the door. The other people that were involved for us were our procurement department. We in legal, for any type of project like this before, have never been proactive in using our procurement resources. And this was the first project that at least I know of in my 8 years at ABF of the legal department making use of our procurement team. They helped us with our RFP. They did an e-auction for us for our chosen providers. But they were a subsidiary part of our project to get BusyLamp onboarded. It was IT was essential, and like Lynn says, get them involved from day one. They do these projects all the time. Yeah. Utilize everyone in the business who is there to help you and will have a say, and make sure you talk to them early. We had an issue with our internal audit team, or I think it was our IT auditor. Just everyone wanted a piece of him, and unfortunately, if you're at the back of the queue, you can wait longer and it holds up your project. But it's just making sure you talk to people early.
Yeah. And don't underestimate how busy they are, I think, is what I've learned. As Dan said at the beginning, we're not a profit-making part of the business. And so often, legal solutions aren't necessarily the most pressing for the business. So it's fair to say that you've really got to stamp your foot and make your case, and that sometimes takes a bit longer than you might think it will, I think, is what I learnt.
Agreed.
So Lynn, you actually purchased and went ahead with your legal spend management last year, right in the heart of the pandemic. Did it slow down your project at all?
No, it didn't. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone necessarily, but no, it didn't. Ultimately, we had a need. We'd identified. We just finished all of our demos before lockdown happened in the first round, so we'd sort of got enough information to keep it running. I think it would have been difficult if we hadn't have had the demos, because I find online demos without somebody in the room to really drill into quite difficult. But the actual rollout of the product, it was challenging doing it remotely, and there would have been times when it would have been so much easier to have been sat in a room and somebody shown you which button to click to make something work and to ask questions. But we got through it. It was fine. It didn't slow us down. The need didn't go away. In fact, the need only intensified during lockdown. So actually, really for us, it was just about getting on with it, really, and we did. So not necessarily one to be advised, but certainly nothing to put you off. And I think with the change to remote working, actually, reality is that's how we're going to roll out a lot of software products anyway going forward. So it's probably just expedited some of how we will work in the future anyway.
How about yours, Dan? Is yours all very London centric, or was it when you rolled out?
It was quite London centric, but that's just due to the nature of where most people sit. It's just a more central location. So we were, I guess, from that respect, we were lucky that we started our process, I think, in 2018. So pre-pandemic, like Lynn says, it is easier to have demos from people where they're in the room and you can just grill and grill. But like Lynn says, it's the new normal. If you want to use that phrase, this the way it's going to be. It's going to be rare that you'll get this opportunity to go into an office in the future.
Yeah, so I think looking back to ours was quite remote because we had teams all across the country. So we did get together for various workshops where we kind of had brainstormings, but actually all of our weekly meetings, it was dotted from Bristol to London to Edinburgh to Halifax. So and I think, as Lynn said, as we move into more and more home working, I think this will be the way it goes forwards. And you just think now the fact that we're doing this as a webinar, whereas previously you would have done this face to face with everyone sat in a room somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, our IT team isn't on site anyway, so reality is it was never going to be sort of a everybody holding hands, rolling this out together. It was always going to be a bit remote. So it probably, the pandemic has just emphasised some of those things, I think.
So moving on to all things money. So at times of budget cuts and uncertainty, legal spend management is obviously one of the easier solutions to make a business case for, as it improves cost visibility and directly drives those cost savings that Dan was talking about earlier. Did you need to make a business case, and how easy was it to make the case?
So for us, as we already had an internal kind of spend management tool in place, it was a bit easier than having to do a very formal business case. As long as, for our GC, basically his requirements were, you look at the entire market, you grill everyone, you find your best products, come to me, we'll have a chat, but you need to show that you've been totally thorough and looked at everything. We're lucky that our GC has a lot of trust that we will do a thorough search and trust our judgment that if we think it's going to be right, and if we've spoken to various key legal people in around the world, then he was basically happy with what we would chose.
Nice.
I mean, we did have to do a business case, but I think it was less intense than I was concerned it might have to be. We really focused on our business case as a time saved more than anything else, more than necessarily cost saved. So for us, it was working out, and part of the survey that we did with our team was, how much time are you spending on doing this? And then when we added up the hours across the team, the business case almost wrote itself at that point, the amount of time our team would save. And you can calculate that into figures if you want to, with the sort of cost of a per hour of a lawyer. It added up pretty quick. The other part of it was that BusyLamp really supported us actually with the business case analysis and being able to come up with their own workings of how much is a typical saving as a rollout of the product, etc. And that really helped me to just feed that information directly into the business case that we needed to provide for our IT procurement teams. So yes, we did one. It wasn't as painful as I thought it was going to be. It was necessary, and actually it was quite a useful exercise, interestingly, that it made you really think about what it is that you want to get out of the product. And I think that's then carried forward now into being able to know what it is we want the product to succeed in doing. So I think it really did focus our minds more than being a particular challenge that we had to overcome.
Okay, thank you both. So Dan, you've been up and running with legal spend management a lot longer than Lynn. How does spend management help you manage the business during BAU, and how did this differ over the last year?
So I think the key thing that we've noticed over the last year is that without having a solution in place, invoicing and payment of law firms would have been a nightmare. We used to have a very convoluted process where I'm sure this is familiar to lots of people, that the law firm sends you an invoice, it has to be signed off by the lawyer that engaged the law firm, then it gets passed to the next person in the approval chain, then it gets passed to the next person. Unfortunately for us, lots of those people sat in different offices, so there was always a huge delay in passing the invoices through, and then it had to go to finance, and so it's taken forever. So for us, BusyLamp has been amazing at getting our invoices approved incredibly quickly. So before we would take a long time, I can't put a number of days on it, but it was not ever under 30 days that we would manage to get an invoice from receipt through to payment. It was just an impossibility for us. And with having COVID, with having BusyLamp, there's no excuse now for our lawyers not to be able to approve invoices quickly. So that's the main thing that we've seen, is that, yeah, people were using it before, but now there's a real emphasis on quick payments of invoices, quick reviews. People are just more engaged because with remote working, you now have no choice. That is what we have to do.
I think to speak of days rather than months is pretty good there, actually, Dan. I think we're
Yes.
probably more in months than we were before BusyLamp.
Yeah, I think that was definitely one of the things I noticed when I saw some of the numbers of how long our invoices had been there. And we used to have spreadsheets come in from a couple of our big firms telling us how many invoices were outstanding and
how many days overdue.
And that endless thing of then it was addressed to someone who had long left the team, even the bank, and so yeah, you then back to square one, and it's what you both said at the beginning of, it's that admin time of chasing invoices from both sides, because unfortunately it's recognizing that paying of invoices is the end of the chain, and everyone's busy onto their next project, aren't they? So they're kind of onto doing their lawyer role rather than actually their invoice.
Exactly, and having a solution like this just makes that review process simple and easy. I mean, everyone can click a button.
That's very true. So as I mentioned at the start, spend management is more than just e-billing. What are both of you planning to do to get more from the system in the near future?
So for me, there's a couple of real benefits, and this is the heart of our project. We never saw it as just the invoice review. It was always the end-to-end engagement of the law firm that we wanted to utilise the tool for. So within the BusyLamp solution, there is a sourcing function which allows us to issue requests for advice to our law firms through the system. So we really are now moving away from all of the different forms of instructing counsel that we had beforehand. So, emails, telephone calls, text message, who knows what, any old way. We're moving away from that, and we're making sure that the team are instructing everything through the platform now. And the idea there is that will allow us to get more data in terms of the proposals that firms are putting forward. It will allow us to be a bit more competitive with the way that we obtain quotes, and to really potentially think about, we've always talked about thinking, getting multiple quotes for big ticket items, that type of thing. It's always just been a bit too difficult to achieve, but the idea now that the tool will help us do that. And the other part that we really want to make use of in the short term is value add. So within our panel firms, we have a lot of value add options, and they're important to us, and it's important to the relationship that we utilize those in the best way, that we get the best out of those. But it's also important to the law firm, I think, that they're reflected. It's not free for them to provide those value adds, so we want to use the system, and we've set up, we're in the process of rolling out a value add matter, if you will, with specific codes that the law firms can use that align with our panel framework, for them to record all of the good stuff that they're giving to us, so that we can recognise that, and that will come up for panel review and everything in the future, but also to really, help the law firms that maybe aren't living up to the panel process that they said they would give us everything, and maybe they've not, or they're giving us way more and therefore they deserve to be recognised for that. So in the short term, it's really about sorting out that end-to-end piece from engagement, and really using the sourcing tool and trying to get the best out of our value add reporting.
That's good. I think that's such a great idea, because then actually, even for the law firms as well, it means they're recording all their information in one place, rather than please record this in yet another spreadsheet and remember to send to us. So it saves them time as well.
Yeah, agreed. I think that value add recording is excellent. I know it's something that we at ABF don't do. I mean, we know that law firms, I'm sure like all people, law firms give you that free 20-minute phone call, or every now and again you get a secondee at a discounted rate. But actually, how many of us do record that and then acknowledge that? Mm-hmm. I know we don't. For us at ABF, we're looking more at the billing guidelines. So we already have those for our American firms. We have quite a strict set of guidelines for them, but around the rest of the world, we don't have anything in place. So it's something that we know that we need to be implementing. So that will be one of our next tasks within BusyLamp. And another feature is we don't really drive the maximum benefit out of the reporting. We pull a lot of reports, but we probably need to be more focused about what do we want from these. How can we use these reports to inform our discussions with law firms? Unlike Lynn, we don't have a named panel. We have a indirect panel that we could tell you who our top 10 firms are, but being able to get more knowledge to actually utilize leverage with those firms would be great.
And I think actually your point there, Dan, it's all coming down to consistency, isn't it? Because the billing guidelines are one of those things that most firms probably have something written down somewhere, probably hasn't been looked at in a long time, and then different teams apply the rules differently. Some will allow some things, some will say no, that's not allowed, and it does almost become kind of a bit like Chinese whispers, as people are trained as they join teams as to what they are or aren't allowed to do. So I know it kind of sort of becomes a bit of a firming up what has always just kind of just been a bit fluffy before. So I think it helps provide that consistency for both the clients and the law firms. So.
Agreed, because we have guidelines in place, but if you were to go around and ask our lawyers what are they, 2 of the 100 might know. If they could even find them, that would be even better. But it's that consistency of who applies what, and if the system can take care of that for you, it's simple.
Well, what we found was that nobody ever really sits down and teaches an in-house lawyer how to review an invoice. It just doesn't seem to happen. And so there are huge inconsistencies of the types of review that happen within the teams. And I think by implementing our billing guidelines, which we did at the very beginning of the BusyLamp rollout, that has provided guidance to the team. And, the system itself will flag what is non-compliant with the billing guidelines so that we're taking a much more consistent approach. It is a work in progress, I would say, because, there are some changes that we need to make culturally to some of the things that we do and just really embedding some of that. But I have to say, I think from just rolling out some guidelines and giving some thought to, well, actually, you shouldn't be accepting photocopying charges for this or whatever, really helps the team, particularly our junior members of the team who are really coming at this with previously probably no real guidance.
No, that's very true. I think we had a discussion about that, didn't we, Lynn? That no one ever teaches you how to review an invoice. It's one of those things. I'm like, please do this. You're like, how? Yeah. And even having been on the other side of preparing those invoices, it doesn't make it any easier to review it as the lawyer, does it? No. It's great to see how much use you've both been able to make of the system over the last few years. So, Martin, have we had any questions come in, or shall we open the lines up for questions?
So the chat box does have a few questions, and it does seem that a couple more are coming. If you like, I can address them to the speakers.
Yes, please.
So there is a question for Lynn asking, how was your experience implementing a new platform during the pandemic and rolling it out across the team as well? You did touch on this as well, but maybe you can just go back to it.
Sure. The experience was actually fine. It was fine. I think when you're in it, you just got to get on with it. So I just don't think we stopped and thought, oh, hang on, we're rolling this out in a pandemic. That's maybe not the best thing. We just needed to get on and do it. So it was difficult at times. There was times where it was very frustrating that I couldn't sit down in a room with my team and show them or, really explain what it was that we wanted to achieve. There has been times when it has been a bit more difficult, I think, but actually it's been fine, and it's just a matter of getting on and getting it done.
So a bit of perspective from me. So although we didn't roll it out in a pandemic, we did have to roll it out virtually because unfortunately I was not allowed to do a global world tour to Sydney and South Africa, Argentina and Mexico. So we had to do it virtually to the majority of our legal team. And like Lynn said, it was fine. There was quite a lot of hand-holding. It was just making sure people knew what was coming, knew what was expected of them, and that when it went live, that you were there at the end of the phone, do screen shares to be able to guide people. We actually wrote an idiot's guide to the BusyLamp system to just make it as straightforward as possible that people could follow. Okay, right, I'm having this issue. Okay, let's look at the guide and do it this way. And we found that really helped for us. Yeah,
we also have a screenshot how-to guide. And we're actually working at the moment on with our law firms to create their May screenshot how-to guide as well, in terms of, one, how they use the system, but also what our expectations of them using the system are. So that's work in progress, but the guide has been, essential for the team. And I do, at the beginning it was very handhold, but now it is more about have you check the guide and then come back.
And I think it's recognising, isn't it, that some teams will be using the system every day, and so you'll have some people who will become pros very, very quickly and actually probably teach you how to do things. And then you'll have others who may only use external counsel once, twice a year. So when they come to use it, they've forgotten everything that they've done. And so that's when those guides come in really handy, rather than, as you say, having to go back to hand-holding someone. But I think that leads on really nicely to the question from Mauro. Apologies if I said your name wrong. So he asked, how was the adoption by the law firms you work with? Was it quick or slow? And which were the main issues and pain points you faced? And did you encounter resistance or good acceptance? Oh, and a little bit more. And was and is it critical to receive the invoices in the leads format to make efficient use of legal spend software? Wow, all those questions. So adoption by the law firms.
So for us, we have a diverse range of law firms around the world, from huge multinationals to one-man bands, tax specialists for the state of Uttar Pradesh in India. So for us, we found that the majority of the larger firms, it was just like, oh yeah, e-billing, we know that, we're comfortable. So there was no issues for us with them. And I must say, for lots of the smaller ones as well, there was no issue. As long as they knew what we wanted, then they were fine with it. We obviously have, you're always going to get some law firms that are resistant, but we did find that was mainly the smaller ones that were resistant, just because it's a different process to what they usually do. They didn't, and this actually goes on to the final point about leads files. So the majority of our smaller firms do not use or import leads files. They just generate a manual invoice and import the data manually. So for us, they had already been doing that on a different system. So we were just, in effect, for them, replacing an archaic system with a shinier one.
How about you, Lynn?
Yeah, I mean, adoption by the law firms has been good on the whole. What I will say is all of our law firms have been very on board with this as a process. We haven't really faced any pushback from them. I think they see the benefit as well. If they're going to get paid quicker, for them, it's probably not a bad thing. What I would say, it's not been, without challenge. There have been some difficulties that we've had to face, and we haven't yet completely finished that process off. We really only got them on board in September, October. So in terms of timing, we've spent before Christmas really getting them up to speed. And, we're still now just finalising some remaining niggles with some of our law firms. But all of them have been very keen to support us on this journey. What we've done, it's, as I said, I think right at the beginning, we view our law firms as our partners. And so we've really tried to keep them involved in some of the process. Again, we probably could have done more, which would have possibly got some of the niggles out of the system earlier than we've seen them. But we've generally faced no resistance. It's been pretty easy sailing. Most of our law firms already had the system. Yeah. So that was pretty good. And the ones that haven't have been pretty on board with getting it sorted. So it's been okay.
I think the key thing is you just need to be very clear what you want the law firms to do. Like we told law firms that we wanted basically 4 things, and that if they failed to do those, then we'd have to reject their invoices. So it's just being clear of what your expectations are for the law firm. And I think that helps a lot. With a few of the law firms, we did have calls before we rolled out BusyLamp, where we went through what we wanted them to do. And obviously it's a two-way street. So we asked, what can we do for you to make it easier for you? Whether it's we have a certain naming convention for our matters, whether we always tag in a certain person in your accounts department, you need to let us know as well what would help yourselves.
Yeah. Just following up on that. So going back to my Lloyd's journey, I actually, so in answer to Mauro, really, law firms are well ahead of all of us on e-billing. Some of them have been using it since the early 20 kind of sort of 2010s, if not even before. So they're very, very established in this. And so I actually used that experience to start the process. So I actually went out to all of the law firms before we even started the kind of sort of demo process and said, what are the e-billing systems that you like? What do you like about them? What do you dislike? What do they not give you? Which are the ones that if we said we were going to roll out, you'd cringe and just say, please don't do that. So I really worked with them to begin with. They even helped me draft some of my RFP questions. So our law firms were engaged again from a very, very early stage. We also worked with a couple of them to help us with our billing guidelines, because as you both said, it was something completely new to us. We'd never, ever sat down and put everything all in one place. So we worked with a couple of them to make sure our billing guidelines weren't unrealistic, we weren't asking too much. And so we really had a very collaborative approach all the way through. And so they massively thanked us for this, because they're like, we never get included. We're always kind of like the last to be there. Whereas these e-billing, they've got experts, specialists who have been doing this for so long. And so they really helped us build our system. So hopefully, Mauro, that's answered all your questions. But the leads files as well, I would say that because lots of systems will give you the opportunity to manually upload, the leads files don't become an issue, because there is always that option for the law firms. But I think, as Dan and Lynn have said, it means their invoices get paid faster, so therefore they're willing to do this. I think the one thing I would say is, please bear in mind, though, that the law firms are working with lots of different systems. So sometimes there may be little niggles that come through, but obviously now, as Lynn and Dan have said, BusyLamp is used by most of these law firms. So now it's just adding on. So that's what happens. So that the law firms have their own internal guidelines for rolling out each of the systems. Yeah. So we've got one last question from Andrew. Let me just scroll up. So, right, going too far. In your business cases, did you include any anticipated savings from introducing BusyLamp? And if so, have these been achieved, or was it difficult to make the savings?
So we did. I don't know yet whether we've made the savings. We haven't got far enough through the year to work it out. I mean, we didn't put loads of figures all over the place. Like I said, we really focused on time saved rather than money saved, but we did use resource from BusyLamp, who provide you with some guidelines on potential cost savings. It will be interesting to see whether we see those returns in the first year. I think a lot of that will be very much aligned with enforcement of the billing guidelines, which is, as I said before, work in progress. So it will be interesting to see exactly how that pans out. But I can already see the time savings on our side, which is for me one of the main achievements already, only a few months in. So.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest savings we've seen is internal lawyer time. They're no longer getting bogged down with our old invoice review process. It's far quicker for them. It's literally click a button, open your invoice, review it, click tick. Next person in the chain gets it automatically. And one of the savings that we have had that's been a bit difficult to really quantify is in the US, the strict enforcement of our billing guidelines. We probably wouldn't know what we spent previously on expenses because people would just shove it in the disbursement charge. And now that disbursement charge is separated out, and if you try and do phone calls and photocopying and like meals out during the day, they just get shut down straight away. So there's all those savings that we have made, but we probably can't put a number on. One other saving that we have seen is when people try and use smaller firms, we're not doing that as much anymore. So we have actually seen our use of firms drop probably by half, where that spend is being driven to bigger firms. And we have actually noticed that through our use of BusyLamp, we have looked at, okay, what are we spending for? So the commercial department, actually, it's cheaper if we hire someone else. So we actually have done that a couple of times. We've taken long-term contractors rather than going out to a law firm for 3, 4, 5 times the rate that we would pay the contractor. So that is one of the savings that we've been able to see.
That's great. Wow. So, right, with just 4 minutes to go, because we've managed to talk lots of things, I'll just round up by actually looking at some of the future things that may come with legal spend management. I think all of us have talked about collaboration between our law firms and our firms. WIP, that age-old thing that clients love, law firms don't like, but obviously, it's one of the things that really does help build up the relationship, and you know what's coming. For Lynn, obviously managing her budget so that she knows how much more is coming through on a particular project, so that she can be explaining what is happening. Managed services, talking about outsourcing the invoice review work so that it's not being done by the lawyers. AI, obviously advancements by the day lead to automation becoming more and more accurate and able to carry out additional tasks. So we may see lots of development there. Integration, we both Lynn and Dan started off at the beginning talking about that ideal of one system that does everything. But hopefully as we go through, we'll start to see lots of the different software systems linking in together so that they can be talking to each other far more smoothly. And yeah, obviously platform solution, the dream for lawyers, just one system that is capable of managing the full life cycle of legal work, mainly avoiding the need for multiple logins and trying to remember all those passwords, or even if it's a single sign-on. But it's that thing, isn't it, of having to go into lots of different systems is always the bane. And as most people recognise, unfortunately, lawyers do in the main work in Outlook, Word, maybe Excel if they're reaching out a little bit more. Oh, and of course PowerPoint. Who could forget PowerPoint? So yeah, that system, it will be amazing to have a platform solution that does everything. So I'd just like to round up by thanking Lynn and Dan for sharing their insights into their experience. Please do feel free to connect with any of us via LinkedIn, or if you'd like to ask any further questions, or if you prefer, please send your questions via ECLA. So thank you for joining us this morning. Enjoy the rest of your day and hope to see you again soon. So thank you all. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you
Bye.
guys for joining us, and then thank you from our side as well. It was a very interesting discussion. It's always great to get on-hand experience on, especially in times like this. So once again, thank you, Joe, thank you, Dan, and thank you, Lynn, for taking this time. And from the ECLA side, we hope to see you again next week, where we will be discussing legal privilege. So please check out the website. And as Joe mentioned, if you have any further questions, either feel free to relay them to us or to contact them directly. So thank you once again, and I hope to see you all soon.
Bye.